Episode 11, Governor Flame. The door of the Koopa cruiser opened with a hiss as Corporal Blue Shell stepped down the ramp onto the streets of Mushroom City. At the foot of the ramp, the Boomerang Bro paused, looking over his surroundings. It had been 3 years since he had last been here, and boy, did it feel good to be back. He had had just about enough of Captain Boom Boom and his garrison. Mushroom City, center of Koopa Empire operations in the Mushroom Kingdom, was, unfortunately, a mere shell of its former self. In the days following Mario's death, the group that would eventually evolve into the terrorist organization Fire Flower had put up quite the resistance in the city, and it had taken an entire year and a whole lot of bombs to smoke them out. As Blue Shell walked away from the landing pad, he saw workers hard at work repairing some of the holes in the skyscrapers, although they hadn't even come close to erasing all of the damage Mushroom City had sustained during the war. With a roar of rockets, the Koopa cruiser took over behind Blue Shell, the Koopa absent-mindedly watching it disappear into the clouds. It was odd to think that ages ago the design had been used for the Emperor's private ship. These days, Koopa cruisers were mass-produced and used as a form of military transport. A sure sign of how much the Koopa troop had evolved, to be sure. Blue Shell turned away from the landing pad and began to walk down the sidewalk on what must have been quite the busy highway in the city's prime. Most of the shops were closed now, and there were precious few cars driving past the Boomerang Bro on the street. Most of the inhabitants of Mushroom City were Koopa troop members there on military duty, so as such there was no need for most of the stores or entertainment facilities. It essentially functioned as a giant military base rather than a residential area, even though there were a couple of the city's old inhabitants who still managed to scrape by. Banners of the Empire hung on every building, as a constant reminder of who was in charge. Blue Shell felt the Koopa Emperor's eyes staring down at him as he continued down the sidewalk at a steady pace, well aware of the importance of his mission. Corporal Blue Shell's destination was the tallest building in Mushroom City, which was once the headquarters of the Mushroom Kingdom's largest broadcasting network but now was the Koopa Troop's primary headquarters in the kingdom. It was in better shape than a lot of the other buildings in the city and hung with an extraordinarily large amount of banners. Blue Shell crossed the street and headed through the glass doors into the main lobby. The lobby's floors were of black marble, with a huge orange face painted on the floor. This face, while at a first glance was identical to the generic Emperor Bowser faces that adorned most Koopa Empire banners, was in fact that of Prince Bowser Jr., the ruler of Sector 8. It was recognizable as such by the subtle fact that there was less hair on the Bowser Jr. logo than on the Bowser one. Around the lobby, there were several Koopa troop officers speaking with one another, discussing the typical kind of gossip military officers made with their peers. He caught several snatches of conversation involving a new royal decree the prince had put out, although he couldn't quite tell how that was relevant to members of the army like him. Putting the thought out of his mind, Blue Shell approached the front desk. The person at the front desk was a pudgy Monty Mole who had an annoyed expression on his face, as if his lunch break couldn't come fast enough. He glanced away from the small computer off to the side of the front desk and peered at Blue Shell intently with his squinty eyes. "Corporal Koopa of Blue Shell, under the command of Captain Boom Boom," he said, identifying himself. "I'm here to see the governor." "The governor?" the Monty Mole replied in confusion, peering at Blue Shell even closer. "Sorry, pal. You don't have clearance for that. You're going to have to present a letter from your captain, and then I'm afraid you'll have to schedule an appointment. Governor Flame is very busy right now, with the prince's new decree and everything." Something clicked in Corporal Blue Shell's brain. He did not have time to deal with this bureaucratic nonsense. The future of the entire empire was at stake, no matter how crazy that sounded. "Captain Boom Boom is finished," Blue Shell exclaimed angrily, slamming his fist down on the shiny, polished white desk. Several of the officers in the room glanced at him, expressions of astonishment on their faces. Blue Shell knew that Boom Boom, despite being rather low down in the chain of command and generally weak, was well known throughout the Koopa troop due to having gone toe-to-toe with Mario several times. This information alone would probably make the news from here to Koopa Central.
Boom Boom is finished,
the Monty Mole exclaimed, with wide eyes.
You mean there was a revolution? Was it Fire Flower?
Asked a Lakitu officer who had been hovering nearby, listening to the conversation.
No.
Blue Shell shouted.
It's something far, far worse, something I don't feel comfortable shouting out to the world unless Governor Flame gives me the okay. This is real important stuff. Stuff that Koopa High Command needs to hear about.
He leaned in even further, as the Monty Mole pushed his desk chair back, trying to be out of the reach of Blue Shell's arms. The Boomerang Bro could see that he was just a simple receptionist who probably hadn't even been in the smallest battle.
In fact, if I had my way, the Emperor and all of his children would hear about it. Now do you understand why I have to see the Governor, Mr. Monty Mole? I see, S. Sir.
The receptionist stammered.
Top floor, 8th office to the right. That's where Governor Flame's office is. Hope you tell him whatever he needs to hear, sir. You bet I will,
he said, shooting a resentful look at the mole as he walked past him into the elevator, glancing behind him at the lobby. All eyes were turned on him. He had a feeling that he was going to be the prime topic of their gossip for the rest of the day. The elevator began to rise, slowly taking Blue Shell to the top of the skyscraper. He stared out the window, watching as he climbed higher and higher above the city. In the distance, floating over the scarred buildings, he could see a battleship, decorated with the face of Bowser Jr. He stared at it with pride. While he was not the oldest Koopaling, Bowser Jr. was the most respected. Sector 8, his territory, consisted of the Mushroom Kingdom, the Bean Kingdom, and the original Koopa Kingdom. By being given both the homeland of the Koopas and the land of their greatest enemies, Bowser Jr. might as well been handed the Emperor's crown. As most people in the world thought he was sure to succeed his father as Koopa Emperor one day, Blue Shell was proud to serve underneath his flag. His thoughts turned to Governor Flame, the Koopa he was about to see. Flame was something of a mystery. He was scarcely older than Blue Shell himself, meaning he had only been a child during the legendary conflicts between Mario and Bowser. That meant that, unlike every other member of Koopa High Command, he had never fought the Mario brothers. The story went that he had won fame commanding the Koopa troop assault that had wiped out the Snow Mad Armada, a barbarian force hailing from the Snow Kingdom that had sailed down to the Neo-Bowser City harbor and attempted to freeze it much like they had froze Donkey Kong Island in the past. With the famed General Tootin Koopa having succumbed to a terrible desert illness, Koopa High Command had an extra seat to fill and Flame was the obvious choice to fill the slot.
I can't help wondering how he'll handle this,
Blue Shell mused.
Unlike most of the older folks at the table, he doesn't know the brothers fight.
Once the elevator reached the top floor, Blue Shell wasted no time in reaching the door indicated to him by the Monty Mole. He gave it a few quick knocks.
What it is?
Came an annoyed-sounding voice.
Corporal Blue Shell, General. Here to report,
he replied.
Come in,
the general's voice responded. Blue Shell opened the door and stepped in. Governor Flame's office was a fairly spacious room, which was extremely red. There was plush red carpet underneath Blue Shell's feet, and the walls were painting in a slightly darker color. An entire wall was made up of a huge window, overlooking the entire city. Blue Shell slowly made his way towards the large, polished black desk, gazing around the room as he went. There were a variety of photographs hung on the wall. Most prominent among them what Blue Shell assumed to be the last known picture of the Snow Mad flagship, since it appeared to be on fire and in the process of sinking. Slow, smooth jazz played on a radio somewhere in the room as Blue Shell stood before the desk. The chair he was facing was tilted towards the window, leaving him unable to see any of its occupant's features save for his shiny red shoes.
"Governor Flame, sir,"
Blue Shell said respectfully, giving a crisp salute even though he knew the general couldn't see him.
"I have a very important report to give. There has been a recent rebellion inside of Toad Town, and I fear that if it is not crushed, it could eventually grow strong enough to threaten even the Emperor himself."
"Oh, really?" the general scoffed. His voice was rather high-pitched and aloof-sounding, almost like that of a spoiled child. The chair turned slightly, allowing Blue Shell to get his first good look at Flame. Governor Flame was a fire bro who was dressed in a red military uniform, adorned with 2 medals, a gold one in the shape of Bowser's head which showed his belonging to Koopa High Command, and a silver circular one with the image of Bowser's fist on it, likely an honor commemorating his military victory. He was lounging on his chair in a sloppy sort of way, resting his head upon his fist.
"Do you really expect me to believe that, Corporal?"
he said with a knowing sort of grin. Blue Shell instantly knew that he was not going to like Flame.
"Let me get right to the point,"
he said, narrowing his eyes seriously.
"Luigi is back, and I don't think he's planning on quitting anytime soon."
"Luigi?" Flame asked with some interest.
"Didn't he die years ago?" "No, sir,"
Blue Shell replied humbly, sorely hoping he wasn't going to get punished for his boss' stupid mistake.
"It was Captain Boom Boom's fault, General. Luigi was a wreck. I think the captain enjoyed seeming him like that. For some reason yesterday, however, Luigi with no warning rallied the Toads and completely overthrew my division."
Flame mused, getting up from his seat and beginning to pace around.
"Troublesome. Troublesome indeed." "General Flame, sir,"
Blue Shell ventured to ask,
"I suggest we deal with him with extreme force. He's a Mario brother, for goodness sake. The prince needs to know about this."
"No!" Flame exclaimed suddenly, making Blue Shell jump.
Why no?"
Blue Shell replied in confusion, feeling worry creep in.
"I don't think you quite understand the position I'm in, Corporal Blue Shell,"
Flame said, beginning to pace back and forth erratically.
"Do you know what it's like being part of Koopa High Command? Nobody respects me. Goomboss thinks I'm too young, Camilla thinks I'm too weak, and King Boo thinks I'm too stupid. There are other generals in the Koopa troop, Corporal. Generals from District 2 who are older and more experienced than I am, and bound to have dozens of chances for heroics in the little scuffle going on down there. Now do you understand me, Corporal?"
Flame half shouted, striding towards Blue Shell and looking him straight into the eye.
I'm afraid not, sir,"
Blue Shell replied, as respectfully as he could manage. As far as he could tell, the governor had just needed a reason to rant about his insecurities.
"Fame!"
Flame exclaimed, shaking his fist passionately.
"I need to win glory and honor that will place me high above all my fellow officers. Am I going to win that by running to Prince Bowser Jr. and complaining? Of course not. He'll want to fight Luigi himself, and steal my glory."
Flame began pacing around the room again, as his face became enraptured in delusional glory.
"Some of my fellow generals are powerful, yes. Some of them are smart, some of them are experienced, blah, blah blah. Have any other them actually beat one of the Mario Bros? No. I'm going to deal with this problem myself, Corporal Blue Shell, and I'll treat any attempt to inform the prince about this information as high treason."
Blue Shell turned away. He was very, very concerned. Both about the situation in Toad Town, and the governor's sanity in general.
"So? When's this attack going to happen?"
he finally asked.
As soon as possible,
Flame declared.
There's just the pesky matter of the prince's royal decree to deal with. Once that's done, I'll get every battleship in the Mushroom Kingdom to descend on Toad Town and burn it to the ground.
He walked to the window and stared out of it, gazing over Mushroom City as Blue Shell watched, not quite sure what to think.
I'll burn down the old legacy of the Mario brothers and replace it with the legacy of General Fortugas Flame, Governor of the Mushroom Kingdom and future Grand General of the Koopa Empire.
He snapped his fingers, creating a spark.
Make yourself useful,
he said, glancing at Blue Shell.
Since your division's ancient history, I might as well make you my personal aide since I had to fire Gumbiro last week. Grab me a coffee. Tea. Thanks, Governor,
Blue Shell said slowly, beginning to walk out the door. Somehow, he felt that he wasn't feeling near as happy as he ought to in this situation. In fact, it would be fair to say that he was beginning to feel downright awful.